Hi, this is James Himm Mitchell, and in this video, we're going to be continuing looking at Howard's Grand Tableau, this time focusing on the first three cards in his reading. So stay tuned. And here we are with Howard's Grand Tableau, and the deck that I'm using for this series is the Mystical Lenormand. So this is the box. The Mystical Lenormand is by Regula, Elizabeth Fiechter, and the artwork is by Trösch. And so if you remember, Howard came to me and we were talking about his work as an Akashic Records consultant, and so he was interested in seeing what the Lenormand had to say. So in the previous video, which I will have a link to in the description box below, I introduced the spread initially and went over what jumped out at me in the moment when I first laid down the cards. And so in this video, we're going to take it to the next step in my process, and we're going to focus on the first three cards in the reading. So I'm going to take a moment to readjust the camera so we can zoom in on those cards. Alright, so I've readjusted the camera to zoom in on the first three cards in Howard's Grand Tableau. So in the first house, the Rider, we have the Clover. In the second house, being the house of the Clover, we have the Snake. And in the third house, the house of the Ship, we have the Fox. So those are the first three cards in the reading. So going with the first card being the Clover, for me, I look at the Clover as a card that represents an opportunity. It can represent little luck, whereas the Sun card in the deck represents big luck. This is little luck. So with the idea of little luck, the Clover can represent something brief or something short term. So I'm seeing that. Now, in the house of the Rider, and I'm trying to be cognizant and keeping with the idea that there were a few people who wanted to know more about reading the cards in the houses. So I would see this, the Clover in the house of the Rider, I would see it as possibly the arrival of an opportunity, because the house of the Rider always can suggest what's coming in. So it's the jumping off point of the whole entire story, and kind of can shed some light as to what is the triggering or what's instigating the need to have the reading, because this represents part of the issue. So it could represent the arrival of an opportunity. So this could be suggesting that there was an opportunity presented to Howard that kind of prompted this need to have this reading looked at. Now, on the other side of the Clover, because the idea of an opportunity being presented is the positive side, the challenging side to the Clover for me can represent, also with that, any opportunity that's presented to us, we kind of somehow have to look at, the risk involved. So this card would suggest, even though the opportunity may look like it's fortuitous, there could be some level of risk. So Howard would have to examine what's the level of risk. Is he willing to take the gamble that's going to be associated with this opportunity? So I'm seeing that with the Clover. Now, the next card is the Snake. And so now the Snake is a challenging card for me. And I'm saying for me because some people don't read the Snake as a challenging card. But for me, the Snake can represent a complication, it can represent something complex, it can represent a long and winding process because the snake coils. With that, it can also be some form of entanglement. So I'm seeing that. Now, it can also represent a woman. Typically, the playing cards that's associated with each card, means something, and this deck doesn't have playing cards, but this card is associated with the Queen of Clubs, and so for me that can represent a woman. And so tradition holds that if it is referencing a woman, she can be clever, she can be intelligent, she can be she could have, dark hair and glasses, because that's some way to describe her. Sometimes, though, you have to be cautious about what she says, because she might not come from a place of total honesty. So there's some element with that. So it could be suggesting for Howard that he maybe, if it doesn't represent a woman, it could represent for him adopting the traits or the qualities of being clever and intelligent as he's moving through this. So I'm seeing that. So in the house of the clover, though, the snake could represent a short-term complication or a brief complication. So if there is some form of complication in this house, it would suggest that it wouldn't be something that would go on and on and on. It would rather be, a short-term complication, something that's really brief. So that's a good sign to see. So I'm seeing that. And then moving over to the next card, we have the fox. Again, some people see this as a challenging card. So in that regard, the fox can represent something that's either wrong or bad or a mistake. Now, I tend to look at the fox in a positive light because I can see this as a self-employment card. So it's nice to see a self-employment card within the first 3 cards of Howard's reading, because he is embarking on trying to create some business for himself as an Akashic Records consultant. So I like that. And going with that, then I also see the fox as, skill. So this would be him becoming more skilled because it's in the house of the ship. And in this regard, the ship can represent a venture, which is, again, nice, when you're doing something on your own, like self-employment. This is a nice house for that to be in. It can also represent, for me, progression and advancement and moving forward. So it would suggest this combination, the fox in the house of the ship, that there would be some progression or advancement with his skill. So that's good. Now, the other thing about being in the house of the ship, this whole idea about creating a business as an Akashic Records consultant could suggest that this is actually part of his life journey or his spiritual journey, because I tend to look at the ship as a card of, a life journey or spiritual journey. So, that's just another deeper layer of the ship card for me, but that's what I'm seeing in the moment. So that's a really good thing if you look at the fox in a positive light. So now the next thing I would do is I would begin doing the pairing. So I would look at the first 2 cards, the clover and the snake, and create some meaning around that pair. So we could look at that as a possibility of a complicated opportunity. It could be that a woman, going with the snake being a woman, presents an opportunity to Howard. So there could be that. Now with that, it would be a short-term opportunity. He would have to consider, it might be better for him to look at that. Is it going to be a short-term opportunity, or is it going to be a complicated opportunity? And so he would have to decide what level of entanglement does he want to be involved with that, with her. So I'm looking at that. And it could also be that the opportunity may be too good to be true, because the snake card going with the challenging side of that, there may be a question about like how much information is he being given about this opportunity, because I'm seeing this as a possibility of trust being an issue. I would read this as, if it is an opportunity, keep it brief, don't make it complicated, and don't get too involved. That's what I would see. So the next pair would be the snake and the fox. So I would see that as, Howard is looking at this as, complication, with self-employment, because he's trying to create energy and movement around this. And so he's finding that to be a complicated thing. So I'm seeing that, and that fits right into what we had talked about in the previous video. Now I'm seeing the pair as the snake could be clever, and then the fox could be crafty or cunning. So that would be something that he might need to consider adopting. Again, I said, like, if he's going to be clever and intelligent here, then this card would say, how can he be more cunning and more crafty in building his skill set? And going with that too, then this pair could be, having a clever strategy, because I tend to look at the fox as a card of strategy. So I'm seeing that. In a positive sense, if it is a short-term complication, then the fox following that is a positive sign, because I tend to look at the fox as a card of survival, and so he will survive it. That if it's a brief complication, he'll get through it. And so it's just a matter of him riding the complications out. And then the last thing I'm seeing, if we're talking about a woman, now the fox could represent a woman with red hair. So even though I said tradition holds that the snake would be a woman with dark hair, we could allow the fox to be red hair, and then it would be a woman with red hair. I would offer to Howard with this combination that it's an encouragement, you know, it could be a warning, but an encouragement too, for him not to be jealous or envious of other people doing the same thing, because that would be a mistake. The snake card is about jealousy and envy, and it could be jealousy and envy surrounding a rival or who he perceives to be a rival. And then the fox card would be telling, no, no, don't do that because that's the wrong approach. That would be a mistake. That wouldn't be in his best interest. So I'm seeing that. Now, what we could do then is look at the clover and the fox as mirroring, because they're on opposite sides of the snake. And so that could be, like I said, the opportunity to become more skilled. The opportunity to become more skilled. That would be one way of looking at that. It could also be a warning that if this is an opportunity presented to him, it might be a mistake or a wrong opportunity. It might be a mistake for him to consider it because it might be the wrong opportunity for him. And then the last thing could be is if going with the idea that the clover represents a risk or a gamble, then, you know, is it something that he would be willing to take advantage of? You know, so I'm seeing that. Or that be mindful of going back to the snake being, you know, an issue about trust and maybe pertaining to another person, you know, a woman, let's say. It could be that the woman is trying to take advantage of him, and so he needs to be careful. So I'm seeing that. So again, I would look at this as an opportunity that might be presented to Howard, and he might have to strongly think about whether he wants to accept the opportunity or not. In one regard, it might be an opportunity for him to get more skill, but it could also be, you know, something that may be too good to be true, or something that starts out to be a short-term opportunity, or something that turns out to be good and then becomes very complicated. So he would just have to see what level of risk is he willing to take with this opportunity. So I'm seeing that, and that's how I would read the first three cards in the story. So now in the next video, we'll take a step back and we'll look at the four corners and create meaning around those. So stay tuned for that.